Yeah?
My mom calls me from downstairs. Another light bulb's out. I let out a sigh. No! Climbing a 10-foot ladder just to change a bulb? Honestly, it's not something I enjoy at all. I've always been afraid of heights. But then I start to wonder, if just a few dozen feet already feels this uncomfortable, what about those lights sitting thousands of feet up in the air? Those towering structures, massive transmission masts in the middle of the city, places so imposing that even standing nearby can feel overwhelming. So how exactly do people replace bulbs in spots like that? Before looking at how people replace light bulbs at those heights, it probably makes more sense to start with why they're there in the first place. Towers and broadcast masts are often built hundreds, sometimes even thousands of feet above the ground. If you think of a city as a living body, they are its nervous system, carrying every critical signal. Cellular networks, radio, television, police communications, fire response, and emergency calls all depend on those elevated points to function reliably. In other words, without them, an entire city could fall into a state of disconnection within moments. But because they rise so high, another problem appears. How do aircraft see them? At night or in poor weather, these structures can almost become invisible obstacles in the sky. Those red blinking lights you see every night are what allow pilots to identify them and avoid a collision from far away. An enormous structure left unmarked in low visibility can become a direct hazard for aircraft flying at lower altitudes. This is why maintenance on those lights cannot be delayed. No matter how harsh the weather or how difficult the conditions are, the job still has to be done. Because if even one light goes dark on a night of heavy fog, the consequences can go far beyond what anyone on the ground can see. And that's when the people who do this work have to step in. But to be selected, candidates have to meet a long list of requirements. At heights of hundreds of meters where wind can strike without warning, temperatures constantly shift, and every mistake carries a price. What's required is more than skill. It takes nerves of steel. At just a few dozen meters, many people already begin to feel their legs shake and their balance slip. But up here, the ground is so far away that everything below looks like a miniature model. Cars become moving dots, and sound almost disappears completely. The wind no longer feels like a gentle current of air, but sudden jolts that can throw off your center of gravity in an instant. At that point, the body usually reacts on instinct. Palms turn slick with sweat, the heart starts beating faster, and every muscle tightens to hold balance. For many people, those sensations alone would be enough to keep them from standing still, let alone working at that height. If you've seen the 2022 film Fall, you can probably imagine part of that feeling. According to the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, in the early 2000s, this was considered the deadliest job in the United States, mainly because of accidents involving falls from extreme heights. In other words, every climb comes with a level of risk that very few professions ever face. That's why the people who do this work are often paid extremely well. In the United States, tower climbing and telecommunications maintenance technicians commonly earn between $70,000 and $90,000 a year. In a small number of special cases, compensation is even calculated per assignment. Some reports within the telecom industry show that technicians who specialize in climbing very tall towers, especially structures rising thousands of feet, can earn several $1,000s from a single climb, depending on the difficulty and the level of risk involved. However, to reach numbers like that, what they need is far more than simply being good at climbing. This job demands rigorous training, from climbing techniques and the use of safety harness systems to handling emergencies while suspended high in the air. In many places, workers are required to complete specialized safety certifications before they're allowed to operate on structures of that scale. Physical fitness alone is not enough. Psychological stability is just as tightly controlled. Without absolute focus, for example, after experiencing emotional distress or while mentally unsettled, they are not permitted to work, because even a brief lapse in concentration can lead to serious consequences. Before every climb, the preparation process always begins with a mandatory step: shutting down the entire lighting system to eliminate the risk of electric shock. From that point on, everything depends entirely on skill, experience, and protective equipment. The journey to the top doesn't happen in a single step. On larger towers, it starts with a ride inside a steel cage elevator, slowly ascending at a rate of just a few dozen meters per minute. The cage sways slightly in the wind. The higher it goes, the colder it gets, and the air becomes thinner. But that's still the comfortable part. When the structure begins to narrow, the elevator stops. The rest, and the most dangerous part, must be done entirely by hand. The technician steps out of the cage, facing the open void below, and transitions onto small climbing pegs attached along the tower. There are no railings, no platforms, only a safety line and footholds barely large enough for a single foot. From here on, every movement follows one rule: one hand at a time, 1 foot at a time. Each climb can last anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, while the worker carries a tool bag weighing dozens of kilos. And replacing the light is only part of the job. Throughout the ascent, they must inspect cables, identify points of wear, and waterproof connectors and antennas, small details that determine the reliability of the entire system. All of this takes place hundreds, sometimes thousands of feet above the ground where conditions are far from forgiving. Strong winds can cause the entire structure to sway, with the top moving nearly a meter back and forth. And they are not always alone up there. Birds of prey such as falcons and hawks often nest on tall towers, and they do not welcome human presence. With dive speeds reaching hundreds of miles per hour, they may attack anything that enters their territory. In colder seasons, ice can form on guy wires. When it falls, it turns into sharp, dangerous fragments dropping like blades. Even so, none of that is the hardest part. At the very top, what awaits them is a massive piece of equipment weighing dozens of kilograms, roughly the size of a suitcase. Not a single bulb, but an entire aviation warning light assembly. Each unit can weigh close to 40 kilos, and the only way to get it up there is by hauling it with a specialized pulley system. As the equipment is slowly lifted, the technician must hold position mid-air, controlling every small movement to keep it aligned. Once the unit is in place, the most demanding phase truly begins. They must remove the old assembly, install the new one, tighten every bolt, reconnect the electrical system, and seal all connection points against water, all while the wind shakes their body. There is no margin for error. At that height, even a small bolt falling down can reach speeds comparable to a bullet and pose a serious threat to anyone below. After hours of work under extreme conditions, the most important moment finally arrives. When the power is restored, the light comes back on. From that height, they can see the horizon stretching endlessly, sometimes with clouds drifting beneath them, and an almost absolute silence surrounding everything. No city noise, no daily rush, just the wind, the sky, and the feeling of having completed a job that very few people can do. That's why, despite the danger and harsh conditions, there are always those willing to take it on. And you? If the pay were high enough, would you dare to try? And if you're still curious about familiar things that few truly understand, leave a comment below. Maybe it'll become the topic of the next video.